What are the issues in terms of professional development of teachers in India at the moment? What are the issues? What are the cultural problems, challenges? What issues do people face, and perhaps how we're overcoming? So Balwant, what are the challenges in India at the moment for professional development?
The first thing is that in India, we don't have the concept of continuous professional development so far. We call it in-service training only. So the in-service training program is basically monitored by Government of India or state governments, which is only a sort of formality because it is not linked with the need-driven factors. Much more it is linked to the fund-driven factor. The first challenge is that we want, at least through IPDA, this counter chapter, that the concept of continuous professional development and teacher as a professional should be developed in our society. This is my first need, I should say, and first challenge that we are facing here.
Okay, if I can follow up and ask Ken maybe, because you've circulated at a conference, 2 conferences I think, spoken there. What's the impression you have of teachers' development up to the point where you met them, and what might you see could be of benefit?
I think one of the key issues, and this is of relevance to this conference, is we're talking about models of continuing professional learning and development. And if we're looking at models, we quite frequently, and Aileen will come on to this, she's looked at it in her article, in her first article, and in her keynote, I think, this afternoon, is that we're tending to look in an Anglo-centric way. We're tending to look at a lot of the models which come from the US, from the UK, from Australia, from New Zealand, from these type of societies and cultures. And there's a danger of policy borrowing, there's a danger of adopting cultural models and then trying to implant them within different cultures and different societies. And I think we have to be very careful, A, not to patronize that we can do this in other societies and other cultures, and B, that we need to look at where these other cultures and societies are coming from in terms of continuing professional learning. So we're coming in at point 9 on the scale, possibly, although we're not doing it ourselves at that point, but we know what should be done, whereas other societies and other cultures may be at different points on that scale. So my first reaction was, I'm coming in with these solutions, but how do I know whether they will match the cultural needs and the professional and educational needs of the areas in which we're working?
Balwant, what would you say the cultural differences are from your perception? What are the cultural issues that if we were to go there we would need to be aware of if we were engaging in continuing professional learning?
There are 2 major aspects. One is the system itself, which is now pressing very hard on the cultural diversity. The most important thing is if we are able to get into the system, then cultural diversity or cultural differences can be easily tackled. Secondly, we have sometimes equity not on knowledge base, but equity on gender basis, caste basis, class basis. And Constitution is providing that support to all those such categories. So whenever we are trying to incorporate the models or the outsourcing, cultural diversity rather I say is a sort of advantage, because we people in different cultures are always in a race to prove better than the others. One thing. And diversity is a unity in itself. It is not that much a problem that it can affect in the way of professional development or in the way of education. The only thing is that if system is taking care of all these categories, then they are all together, there is no problem, there is no resistance, and the outside resourcing has no difficulty at all.
When you mentioned class systems, etc., certainly when I was in India, I was very aware of the private sector and the huge economic growth of middle classes, and a growth of demand for education for the children of middle class children. And that demand was very much about business and Western ways. And I was aware of a state system and a degree of poverty as well, which meant it was hard to reach perhaps, and there were different perspectives from the private sector to the state sector. So would you say that teachers perceive they have different needs and wishes according to which aspect they work in?
Of course. Of course. As in the previous keynote address, it has been highlighted that now it is coming to the marketing of education. Exactly in India, it has happened almost 90%. It has happened. So state-owned institutions or the responsibility state has gone behind the curtain. Only they are directing some rules and regulations that too can be manipulated at any level. When the market people are there, they can change the rules according to their own investments. And secondly, still, more than 60% people who belong to the lower class or the poverty class, they are in the government schools. And the teachers in the government schools, the selection procedure, again, it is having a lot of reservations. Knowledge is not the first criteria. It's the category gives them more weightage, and they are least bothered about any professional growth, or they are not concerned to grow professional. It is only again in the private sector. Of course, I wish, as at the global level it's going on, that the private sector will come up. The people in private sector, they are really concerning with CPT, or they are really, the managers are concerned so that their manpower grows gradually. So the stress should be now. If the government is interested, it can be taken along, but the private players will definitely improve and prefer professional development.
I think there's also an issue of scale here, because one of the things that really struck me was that working in Ludhiana has a population of over 4 million. Wales has only got a population of 3 million. So we're dealing with, when we talk about percentages in the private sector and in the public sector, we're talking about huge numbers of children, young people, and the teachers who work with them. So mobilizing and bringing that whole sector up to speed, if you like, if we can call it that, is a massive challenge, is a massive task. And that's why the state's involvement is actually important. But then we reach into the political dimension, and we have to ask questions about where the politicians want the schools and want the teachers to be going. And then it becomes complicated.
Yeah. Can I open it up to you, and then I'll come back with some other questions later. Any questions from the floor for Ken and Balwant about the situation? Hello.
I'd be interested to know how you see the setting up of an organisation such as IPDA India might help to address some of the challenges that you've talked about.
We are organising one international conference with the help of IPDA since 2013, session 30. Only once in a year, inviting 40-50 people and 1 or 2 resource persons and myself and my team. Only they are trying to cater to the needs of 4 or 5 states at the moment. Can we, IPDA people, can increase the number of these courses, these programs, maybe 2, 3, or it can be going to the quarterly like that. And more resource persons, more this material and the technology can be provided to those people who are interested to receive that. So my need or my suggestion is that it should not be only a ceremonial sort of thing being done for 2 days in all 365 days. As according to our population, total population as well as the teacher population, we need at least 4 courses, 4 programs at least in a year. So can we associate, or all our dear colleagues who are from different countries or different places, what can they contribute, what they can assist in this direction? This is my thing from my PG.
The other dimension on that one, and again to the audience, is that we are an international organisation. We're an international professional development association. And we need to be talking about the way in which we can generate these networks. And we have people here today from Wales, from Scotland, from England, Ireland, also from Nigeria, Lithuania. And we need to really be drawing on the models of professional learning that they are using within their own political and cultural context, not to mirror them or to borrow the policy, but to actually say, that's interesting, that works. That is how we've introduced this professional learning area within our society and within our culture. In that way, we can learn more effectively.
Any other questions from the floor at all? Please. Yes.
You were talking about learning in terms of schools and colleges, obviously. But actually our college has been asked to link with factories in India who are looking at professional learning. And interestingly, rather than coming to our engineering department to train their engineers, they've come to our teacher education department. Because obviously I think learning in India has a much wider breadth than perhaps we understand it here, in terms of a population that needs much more upskilling. So they're actually talking about education perhaps in a wider context. Is that common, or is this just a particular factory that we've had links with?
It is actually large population, of course, is interfering in the direct contact with all the people. We have this difficulty in all the professions, in engineering as well as in the medical profession, in other professions as well. So it is the necessity now at the government level, as the system level, as well as at our such type of organization level. Now how to change this concept and how to reach to the people in all the corners of this world. That is the point.
Could I just come on to that, because that's a very important point. And in the Journal of Professional Development in Education, we tried to broaden it beyond professional development in schools. It's not professional development in schools. It's not professional development of teachers. It's professional development in education. Now, whether or not India has gone cross-sector in terms of accessing those skills of professional learning and development is one thing. Whether we have, in our areas, we've just done conferences with school business managers who would have gone to the business school to look at their skills because that's where their origins are, but they're coming to education because their context is learning within the school context. And I wonder whether we apply the concept of professional learning cross-sector ourselves sufficiently, or whether we do narrow it down into too many individual furrows.
Well, a related point, I think, is a tendency for different sectors to think that theories only grow in one field. You know, a lot of people have read the work of Black and William, and they talked about the black hole and things like that. But there's no reference to the fact that they pinched it from political science theory from 20 years earlier. And I encounter all sorts of the work of all sorts of teachers who go through a stage of mastering theory and as a label which has to be applied to something and can be applied to nothing else. But they think the theory only belongs in education. And we ought to remind ourselves that actually we're talking about human activity all the time, and learning doesn't just take place in a classroom.
Can I just put a point across to Balwant? You were asked by Helen the question about IPDA and its membership and how we can actually engage. And clearly, as an association, IPDA India will have its own space on the IPDA website. This is being videoed now, so we'll be on it. But I think what you actually said, Balwant, was it's the collective membership, it's the ideas that we want to share, whether it's putting ideas to you or receiving ideas from you and to each other to critique them, to enable various courses or programs of learning, professional learning, to be developed. Yeah? So what sort of interaction would you want over, let's say, the next 12 months? Let's just, because, as you say, 2 days here, there's another 363 days until the next conference. What do you want us to engage with you doing as an association and the members?
One thing is regarding the technical know-how, the models, it can be shared, or it can be a little bit amended according to our needs. One thing if we can provide from this side. Secondly, regarding again the question of funding is there. Now we are bearing the expenses of the resource persons. We will try to organize our own funds from the private sector, which are ready to bear all these things, but not to that extent that we have to pay for the cost of the course at the moment. It can be done later on, but the involvement of the experts and resource persons is no problem.
So in a sense, we can be critical friends to you. You can say, what do you think? Do you have any ideas that you could give us as well? And we would obviously ask that you do the same for us. But it's really trying to get an active involvement from the whole membership rather than just from the IPDA committee, isn't it? It's the networking that Mark was talking about earlier.
And as Balwant has said, we've run a number of successful conferences which have been addressed at local and regional political level, at higher educational level. And to a certain extent, it's pretty much like this audience here, because we're working at a sectoral level. What we haven't done yet is effectively gone into the school level, gone into the level of teachers, teacher leaders, school leaders. And that's in February. There is a symposium and a conference due to be scheduled. Marjorie McMahon and I will be going across in February. And the key focus of that was to switch from the university sector into the school sector, because we need to be looking at engaging and impacting, if you like, on the education at that level. Now that to me is the key challenge. The state and the private sectors alongside is the third dimension of that challenge, how we actually reach and hit out to that level.
It'd be really helpful to get a sense of how leadership development is approached in India. I mean, I know India is a vast continent, so even in some states, because clearly if we can better engage with educational leaders in India, then maybe we can do that facilitation of teachers, UK and Indian teachers collaborating. It's just a question. It'll help to understand this a bit better.
It's a very good idea. We have a lot of things which we can share with the people abroad. So both ways, leadership concept of our teachers, our education system, and the leadership concept of developed countries, it can be brought together, and then something new can be decided for the developing or the emerging societies. It will be very useful. Directly going from one side, it may not be considered as a cascade matter once again. So sharing of the knowledge, sharing of the techniques from both sides of the leadership people can facilitate, of course, the one thing.
We have a real opportunity to grab in this organisation to develop a series of communities of practice which will engage with dialogue through the internet. I know the committee have talked about plans for blogs and various other things which are being looked at. And I think that would be quite an exciting opportunity for delegates who are here today and others within each individual's network to contribute to that wider developing international community of practice.
We got one project, this leadership training from Marjorie, and Kane is associated with that. I sent that proposal to the education minister, who is basically responsible for government schools directly and for other schools as well. I sent that proposal of that program which we are going to organize in February. They studied the program, they were so excited that they did it in the government schools. They invited 40 government school heads. They organized it themselves. I simply asked for a permission and for a sort of financial assistance, but they were so impressed. Now they have started doing it at their own level. I got the observation that they could not do to that the purpose which was required in that, but it's a good change that government, who is a cold iron, at least is ready to move in that direction. I think this is a collective achievement. Our idea can, if make the government to think about all this leadership training, and if 40 school heads have attended that, another 40 or another 50, we are going to do it in the February. If it succeeds in a sort of professional way, then definitely the ball will start moving. This is the purpose, that every teacher should be involved, and the result should not be only need of the teacher, but it should be the need of the child in the school. That is lacking in my country. Whenever a teacher gets a certificate or he attends 4 or 5 conferences, professional development systems, then he is now trying to think that he should be a vice chancellor, he should be a registrar, or he should be some great officer in some bureaucratic setup. Nobody thinks that after getting this knowledge, I should go to the classroom and teach the student. So what is the purpose of professional development or all these programs? If the school learning is not improving, then there is no necessity of this professional development.
Next year, Balwant is giving a keynote, and it would be brilliant to hear what progress has been made as a result of our discussions.